Hello, everyone. Welcome to Start Your Dungeons. I'm Adam,
I'm Bryce.
and today we have a very special guest. We have Ray Jamison, who has a Kickstarter for a new comic miniseries. So, why don't you tell us about the general concept of the Kickstarter?
Thank you kindly. Ray Jamison, I'm also known online as DM Ray. I've created a mini series based off of the first homebrew campaign I've ever run. The only major difference between the comic and the actual homebrew is the characters are of my own invention instead of the players bringing what they brought to the table. The first issue is going to drop on April 30th, and I'm really excited. I've been putting this together for over 2 years now. This has been taking a lot of test of patience. I wanted it to be right out of the gate. I didn't just want to slap something together and say use your imagination and I'm sure you can fill in the gaps. I wanted good art. I wanted good lettering, timing. I was very fortunate to get a publisher, Filbo Publishing in New York, and it has been quite a ride. I can't, obviously, I can't talk about the entire thing, but the majority of this story revolves around anybody that's played a tabletop game. It's almost always with friends. There's exceptions to that, but it's about the camaraderie, and this story revolves around friends just getting back together and something happening at the same time coincidentally. So I think you both would agree if you're with your circle of friends, you're more inclined to be like your inner child as opposed to the responsible adult you are.
Mhm.
And because they all have that type of influence on each other, they're their true selves in a scenario where they're forced to stand and act. All three issues take place over one night, and like I already said, I'm very, very excited to finally release this thing to the public. I think it's finally gotten to a point where it's worthy of the comic book industry.
It's very exciting to hear. I have read comic books and played, tabletop games ever since I can remember. Um, just how much of a task is it to even start this process? I'm an artist on the side, but like I just try to think about the all of the logistics involved in trying to put together even a simple story, even a single issue. Like, what kind of mountain do you have to climb to get something like this off the ground?
The shortest, the best summary I could give is it's the perfect storm. So in my case, I've always been a fan of comics. When I was a kid, I took comic courses of make a character, make a comic. This is how you pencil, this is how you ink, and after that, you can color it all up. Um, the other advantage I had significantly was time. I didn't have a due date. This isn't like a monthly issue where I had to hit a deadline. So because of that, I could say I am not ready.
Hmm.
And when I had the product complete to my satisfaction, suddenly I could say, okay, the next step. I started with an interior artist. I live out in Winnipeg, and I found a comic artist locally, Evan Quiring. You can look up his own comics, Murder City Devil and Lucha Mystery. Shout out to Evan Quiring. Um, I started with him. We put issue one together. There's a whole process for that in relation to the writer versus the artist. Now, obviously, up to this point, I already had a script put together.
Hmm.
Now, that was, I think, a unique process because the homebrew campaign, I already played it out. I knew the end game, I knew the beginning, middle, end. For me, the story is when you think comic books, most people think about powers and abilities, and usually it goes towards superheroes. And what can the protagonist do, powers or not? In my case, it was all about the character development and how they react with each other. So once I was able to put the script together, I was I was very driven to make that script, so I didn't consider it difficult. And again, there was no deadline. I did take my time with it, but I didn't have to crunch this out for a superior or a boss. It was just on my own leisure. And then after my interior artist penciled and inked everything out, I was super lucky. I invested in some talent. All I did was just ask. So this is my first time on the creator side of a comic book. I found colorist Dan Kemp, and for people who don't know who that is, he's colored over 100 issues of Spawn. And I just asked, would you be interested in coloring?
Just
And
like,
he said, sure.
yeah,
And
just
I
like,
figured
hey,
it
there's
didn't
this
hurt
guy
to
that's
ask.
done, this
Yeah.
massive body of work. Hey, what you
Yeah.
doing?
He said, sure, I'm free. I've got an opening. And I was shocked. He's been great to work with. He colored two of my covers, and I guess we'll talk about the covers later. Once it was colored, I found a letterer, um, Micah Myers. He's a Ringo nominee. Hasn't He's two-time Ringo nominee, and that Ringo is for awards for indie artists.
Hmm.
So he almost won Best Letterer, and I figured, well, this guy obviously wants to get that, and
Yeah.
I said to him, you know what, I would love for you to get that, and if you can use my comic to help you get that. Um, he agreed. I've had lots of no's, sorry, I'm busy and
Yeah.
stuff, but these artists that said yes, I was just floored. And so I had my pencil, ink, color, letter, and while this was all playing out, I was on also contacting other artists, other talent for covers. And the same thing, there was some good talent that I hammered down. So there was one artist, John Zalesnik. He hand painted a cover for me of a character named Madracus. He's basically like a serpent man, if you will, and he can vomit lightning.
Good.
And that's the same artist that did the cover work of the original NES Shinobi. He's also done a lot of video game art for. There was a franchise I really liked in the late '90s called Worms. Um,
Hmm.
Recently, in the last couple of years, there was a sequel to Warhammer 40K Chaos Gate. He did the cover art for the original back in the late '90s. He's done like oodles of work for both Magic the Gathering and Warhammer. His art looks like it looks like it should be on a Magic card. That goes
Hmm.
without saying. Um, Another notable talent is Harvey Salteras. He was the illustrator for the first year of Volume Two's Ghost Rider, where Dan Ketch took over as the rider in place of
Hmm.
Johnny Blaze. He drew the one of the dwarf Sarlacc holding the beheaded monster, and it was really cool. That was the first artist that ever had an influence on me, where I collected issue by issue,
Hmm.
and there's his metaphorical fingerprints all over my work, and I thought that was really cool. That's also colored by Dan Kemp, the Spawn colorist. Um, there's one of a half dwarf. His name is Dun and Eni. He's you can see there's a telescope over his shoulder, and he just blasted a tree. That was drawn, or sorry, that was digitally painted by Jenna Stark in New York. Um, I found her through social media. She was just, I saw some of her work. She had this really nice one of the same style of Gandalf the Grey. And I thought that would look really good, that style as a cover. And I described what I was looking for. I showed some of the interior art samples of the character and described what I thought would look good. And the end product speaks for itself. I'm quite impressed with it. The last variant cover, the individual one, is Erica Hollis. She drew digitally. She created Chasgo as a blue-skinned elf, and again knocked it out of the park. The intention was to make the character look like he was donning a human persona while entering a lit room, and she had a good play with shadow to kind of have
Hmm.
that influence. I think it looks really, really well. And then the main cover, of course, drawn by Jimbo Salgado, and he's been all over Marvel and DC. Batman Unhinged from about a decade back, and drew out the characters. And again, Dan Kemp also colored that one for me. Um, I think what I enjoyed the most out of making the characters is it just had a natural feel to it. I guess this is the best way to put it. It felt right. I based them off of real people in
Hmm.
reality, and knowing how these people would interact with each other in conjunction with exaggerating their strengths and their weaknesses, it 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 seemed to what I imagined was me setting up a D&D game and predicting what my players would do, very much like what a dungeon master would do. Basically, the comic is essentially dungeon master's footnotes, all the anticipations with how they would act, basically.
One of the things that I wonder about with with people who write comic books and novels in this in fantasy worlds, very much the traditional fantasy, is how much time do you spend living in that world in your head? You know,
You mean just thinking about it off hours, for lack of a better
right?
phrase?
Like, it's not even thinking about plot. It's just how much of your just kind of sitting around thinking is just you're just thinking of places and things that are happening kind of in the background, just kind of living there.
Well, for me, I don't. I guess to clarify on what you're reflecting on there, me personally, I don't ever feel over encumbered or overwhelmed or anything to that capacity.
Mhm.
Usually, um, because of work and my children, I drive about probably about 2 hours a day,
Mhm.
approximately. Driving, you can do a lot of thinking, especially if you're on autopilot. I mean, I'm not dead to my surroundings or anything like that, but it's time to think. And when you're married, you have kids, you have responsibilities. Your mind is focused on your surroundings as they should be. But if you've got some solitude, you can let the mind wander. And I think I personally feel that's where my best thoughts come into play. Another exercise I like to do is if I do have solitude, I try to play lyricless music, usually something orchestrated, and I try to find things that don't remind. Like I'm not going to look up the Jurassic Park soundtrack because I'm just thinking of dinosaurs and people
Mhm.
trying to not get eaten. But if it's music I don't recognize, that tends to help me very much think out scenes and plot and character drive, which is a very important dynamic.
I think it's really interesting to watch this whole process. I mean, for me as somebody who also grew up loving comics, wanted to get into the industry at one point, made a lot of connections, very luckily got to meet Tradmore, who's a very famous artist, love always all of his work and stuff. But I think it's really interesting to see, people go for it. And I think it's amazing that you chose to do something that again had already, like you said, a pre-designed almost storyline, but how you change that to interact with the comics. And I'm looking right now at the main cover, that has all four of them on there. And to me, because he's one of my favorites of all time, this feels very Jim Starlin to me, of that
Oh,
old
interesting.
school style to it. And I love that because I think it definitely has that sort of style where it breathes fantasy from it, but it almost in this style you're drawn into it because it's like, is it fantasy? It has almost a space feel to it. Does it really? And that's what really grabbed me when you first sent it to us was this I didn't know what it all was and I needed to know more. And I
Thank you.
think that's really amazing just to see, and kudos for that. Um,
Thank you.
I definitely am intrigued, to get an understanding of, for you, you're looking to kickstart one issue right now, right?
Hmm.
Was there ever a decision for it to just be, because you said there's three issues, to just do a trade paperback and do it all, or is this more of like a test field to see how it goes or something? Or is it just I want to have time to make sure each issue is done and get them out there one at a time so I don't have to do a whole massive graphic novel in some cases.
Well, to be honest, all of those options you said, my honest answer is all of the above.
Okay.
So, one of the minor reasons it took so long is these are uh, top caliber talent.
Hmm.
So, I'm getting what I'm paying for. So I'm a working class fella with a wife and kids, and they're my priority, and I don't ever want to take away from that. So I had to save and then execute when I had the chance. Another thing I tried really hard to, reflecting on just the cover, and you were drawn in. I need to know what
Yeah.
this cover is about. I wanted to make sure that although this was a fantasy setting, I wanted to make sure that it was unique from all of the tropes. So,
Hmm.
knights kill dragons, save princess. None of that's in this book. None of it. And I don't know why, but most people, if you say fantasy, for whatever reason, it's a cool genre. I'm not knocking it, but a lot of people think like 1980s movies that involve sword and sorcery,
Yeah.
and in their mind, it never evolved from there. So I mean, just like any genre of movie and decade, things aren't going to age well. So when you say fantasy movie, they're thinking mullets and bad CGI and bad puppetries. They're thinking that, and I wanted to take away anything that would draw people to think in
Hmm.
such a manner. So the fellow with literally a telescope that can blast raw magic out of it. Yeah, you wouldn't see that in an 80s sword and sorcery. One of the individuals, Madrakis, who is like a giant, he's a descendant from this kaiju esque electric eel, essentially. It's known as the Great Storm Worm, and he's wielding this giant purple sword, and he's got brass armor and stuff. Visually, you would not affiliate that. I tried to make it as unique as possible, so when you say fantasy, just like you pointed out, I got to know where this is going, because I
Hmm.
don't really, I can't say it's like this and it's like this. It's kind of, what is it? And
Hmm.
when I had that cover made, that main cover especially, that was the first one I had made. It had to be a statement, just as you described. Your reaction was exactly what I wanted the average person to say. Um, okay, this is different, and it's what's the word? Intellectually stimulated, because I have
Right.
no idea what I'm about to get myself into.
And I think that's an important thing, you know. I remember going, not as much nowadays, but going back to the comic shops, you know, even like a few years ago, talking about 5, 10 years ago, and just covers were just covered in all of this, not even artwork. It was like they had words all over it. There was all this stuff. And the ability of I think this cover is so great is it draws your eye from top to bottom or
Hmm.
from bottom to top. It flows very naturally. It's not covered in tons of words saying #1 first issue collector's item like everything was back in the day. I'm sure everyone's got 10 copies of the new Teen Titans sitting at home right now, sealed, waiting to get those
Or
up.
a bunch of spider clones and
Oh
stuff
yeah.
from the mid '90s.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But I think that's really, you know, again, it draws me in and it makes me want to know more. And I think the fact that again, you're pulling from something like the RPG market to be able to pull this out, but it looks like you said, it's not, it doesn't necessarily just read as just fantasy. It looks like something that belongs on a comic shelf. Whereas I feel like sometimes, you know, as I've gotten older, I've moved more towards the indie market and moved towards things that were less superhero in some regard, because I feel
Hmm.
like a
I can
lot of the
respect that.
superhero
I know what you
stuff, yeah, it's kind of gotten a little bit overdone. And I think this look and this feel of this isn't necessarily superhero in some regards. It feels a little bit like there's heroes, there's more to this. And I think that's really amazing to see again this shift. And I'm sure as somebody who, with all this talent you're working with, who are people from an indie market, you know, there some people who worked with Marvel and DC but have moved towards, I mean, to have somebody who worked on Spawn work on your stuff, I mean, is absolutely incredible.
Or those
Mhm.
those two talents, when you really think about it, this is like the early mid 90s. You're talking about the talent of someone who drew a Hellspawn known as Ghost Rider, and someone who's colored a Hellspawn known as Spawn, and
Yeah.
a unique a unique combo. I know I've said this before in other places, but I've had fans basically say it's so cool you got these two souls to cross paths.
Hmm.
Like it's
Mhm.
never been done, but those names are known. That made me feel really good.
Right. And especially too, because some of those people, like you said, they'll never get an opportunity. But we always as kids we're sitting there, oh, I wondered if this guy wrote it and we had this guy ink it and the colorist from this and all that stuff would be such a cool thing. And like that childhood dream almost of having that happen is super, super cool to see. So you said that again, this comes from like a D&D campaign, it comes from a homebrew.
Yes.
When you built this homebrew, was there any intentions of actually doing this as a comic? Like, were you in the forefront going, maybe I'll write this down, tell a story or anything, or was it just I loved this world so much and what happened in it, I wanted to tell this story to everyone else?
Well, the short version is I've been playing D&D for over a quarter of my life. I just turned 40, so I've been playing just before I turned 30. I was kind of late to the game. The main drive and reason why I started playing is because almost 10 years prior to that, I moved. I moved across country. All of my friends were left behind, and I did that for employment reasons. And it was a cool adventure, don't get me wrong. But um, as I already stated, kind of the the core of this book. Anytime I get to see my friends again, it's I'm more mature now. I'm not going to be doing the shenanigans I used to be doing when I was younger. However, with that said, when you see your friends again, even if it's only a percentage of what days used to be, you leave refreshed.
Mhm.
So I started playing D&D just for an excuse to see each other via webcam. We didn't even get to see them face to face, but we got to play and interact and just refresh myself accordingly. That was my whole drive. I just wanted to do a thing, have some fun, go back to my responsibilities, and life goes on. Have that bit of downtime, that reprieve. 10 years later, I look back at it and it just evolved from there. I looked back at the story. These three issues, this is the equivalent of a session zero. So when you meet up with your DM and establish your characters, their backstory, maybe some know each other, and the players have to collaborate and then collaborate with the DM. And this plays out that session zero, the entire thing, all three issues, I should say.
That is really cool. And I think I like that because it sometimes I think people always say the setup is sometimes always the hardest part of understanding where all this stuff comes from. It's always you meet in a tavern and you all kind of get to know each other kind of thing. But I like this because I can get to it to within three issues and really get to see, like you said, your story that you told retold to me through it and kind of get an understanding of how these characters eventually grow and become something even greater than they thought themselves, which I think is amazing to see. Is the plan to keep going after this? If this succeeds and you're like, hey, knocked it out of the park, everyone loves this, I want to keep doing more. Is that the eventual goal to go and do that and maybe do more like mini series almost of different certain story arcs you had in your campaign?
Well, because of my responsibilities, I love my day job, so that's always going to be a priority. That and my family.
Hmm.
Um, what I wanted to do was just have a short, complete story, and I first wanted to know if I can make something worthy of the comic industry.
Hmm.
That includes things like I don't think I could make something of superhero caliber and not have most individuals say it's been done, man, or it's oversaturated. I
Right.
honestly I think there's more to be done in the superhero
Hmm.
genre. With that said, of all the things about it that have been done, it's been done well. And I don't know if I could, it's not that I want to compete, but I don't think I would have something new or exciting. I went the fantasy setting. Instead of looking at capes, I looked at cloaks, essentially. Give cloaks a chance in
Yeah.
comics.
Yeah.
Um, if if this has some level of success, I don't know what it is, but if I get through all three issues and it's pretty good, my goal moving forward, again, I love my day job. I love my responsibilities. So I think moving forward, I would just, if I were to do it again, I don't think I would chase like a monthly
Right.
issue, or I think I would just keep on, like you said, releasing miniseries.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And as long as I'm enjoying it, which I most definitely am, I definitely would be open to doing more. But as of right now, my goal is just to complete this package and be satisfied with it when it's done.
So tell us more about the Kickstarter itself. Like what are supporters what should they expect out of the Kickstarter?
Okay, so you've already mentioned earlier, there's actually two different genres that I'm tapping into here or advertising to. So because of that, I wanted to be as I wanted to acknowledge and appreciate both of those genres. And in a Kickstarter, I mean, you've got lots of options: stretch goals, you've got add-ons, you have different package bundles. So on the comic side, I never thought I'd put five different covers, but because all four characters, it's their first appearance, I decided to put a spotlight on each one with their own covers. So there's packages for different issues. There's even a vendor's package, so you can buy them in bulk, which is cool.
Hmm,
On the fantasy side, well, I got a couple things. First one is laser engraved wood of the Jimbo cover, the main cover. It's the same size as a comic. It's stainable if you want to stain it. Looks really good with walnut after the fact. It's a little bit lighter, but beautiful. Um, I have, thanks to shout out to Warwick Doolan from Australia, I have a miniature of each character, which you can get as an add-on,
nice.
and I also have a custom D20, and it kind of reflects the Madcaps title, which
Very
is really
cool.
really awesome. There's, if we hit certain stretch goals, I can't. You know what? I'm allowed to say this. There's also a map of the area, which would be an add-on if I get enough backers.
Perfect.
There's lots of cool stuff going on. I can't say it all. This is my first run, and although my publisher is running it, again, shout out to Philbo Publishing and Philip Russert. Um, for a first time, I think it has a nice range of availability. I think it's going to be really good.
I had a question on that. So, I think it's interesting to watch Kickstarter always, and the comic scene especially is a very interesting side of Kickstarter for those who haven't looked, where we've really seen it kind of explode with a lot of people who are trying to, again, fill this area in comics that hasn't been filled, mainly because it is a predominantly superhero filled area.
Hmm.
You talked about things being in print, which I think is really, really cool, honestly, because a lot of these Kickstarters are usually just PDF copies. And
We have both.
we have both. So
Yes.
that was my question was, did you ever sit there and just go, I was only going to do a PDF, or was it always, I want to make sure I can have print copies available as well?
Well, I was born and raised print copies, so
Mhm.
that was never off of the table. So one of my first comics I can ever think about reading was in, I believe, I'm going to mess up the number. I believe it's Hulk 340, and that's when he combines Green Hulk, Gray Hulk, and Banner's mind and becomes Professor Hulk for the first time.
Uh-huh. I
The
remember
first
that
time
one.
I had it. Now,
Yeah.
I was an irresponsible 7-year-old and probably weathered the snot out of it and lost it eventually. But Peter David's writing
Mhm.
throughout the Hulk's saga, big fan of. And for me, Some people love PDFs better. Some people love the digital copy. I personally, I'm not a fan of zooming into different parts of panels to get the finer print and stuff.
Hmm.
That's just me. You you have a solid copy. Well, worst case scenario, I need a magnifying glass or my cheaters. I am 40, but um, the one thing that I really wanted the fantasy community to understand about this is I think everybody can relate. Going back to the 80s sword and sorcery trope and people's views of sword and sorcery never growing past that. The last summer when Honor Among Thieves, the D&D movie came out, many people that I mean it's cool to play tabletop RPGs nowadays, but people that grew up at a time when it wasn't, and they go and watch this movie and they see non D&D fans watch and appreciate that movie, there I'm validated. I'm spoken
Hmm.
for. You people get it now. And I wanted this comic to reflect that as well. Reading a giant lizard snake that can like blast lightning out of its mouth, or you look at the dwarf and he's holding the beheaded monster. Well, he looks like a rogue, but why is he carrying a battle axe? What the hell is that thing? Shut up and take my money. I wanted them to just, as you put, Bryce. I'm interested.
Right.
Basically, when you buy into this book, you're supporting one of your own. That's the best way to put it.
Hmm.
This is my first comic. This is not my first D&D run.
That is awesome. And like you said, again, we've seen tabletop just grow and
Hmm.
explode. I mean, across, like you said, I remember telling people I played D&D, and it's like, oh, okay. But now you tell people you play D&D, and they're like, oh, yeah, that Critical Role show and all. Like, it's
Yeah,
very much in the modern sort of stay. I mean, literally,
it
you can
used
go
to
to,
be the punchline to a joke, but
yeah,
now tabletop communities use everything else as the punchline to jokes. It's just a reflection of reality now, as
Hmm.
what
right.
was the intention was supposed to be anyways.
No, it's very, very cool. And like I said, I think, oh man, there's so much. I'm so excited for this because like this is like my wheelhouse when it comes to comic books and what I personally enjoy. Um, I wanted to touch on, you talked about as add-ons, miniatures and getting miniatures designed for this. I think that's really cool because a lot of people like, I'm a miniature gamer. I love painting models. I think that's a really cool design, and having that opportunity, was that something at the forefront when you were thinking of add-ons going, I want to make sure people can have these physical characters
Yes.
as options.
Yes, what I wanted to do was it's either going to be something on your computer monitor or something on your mirror in your washroom or you might actually paint them.
Hmm.
These are paintable miniatures. I should disclaim these are not painted. The D20 is also paintable. It is not painted. I wanted it to be, if you really, I mean, who here has a Deadpool figurine in the room, or some character that they really like? Dritz, who has a thing of Dritz or one of his Panthers as a keychain or something like that. If one of the characters really sits with you, my intention was either you're playing with it, you might not be playing that character, but you might use that miniature, or it's sitting on the dashboard of their car or something like that. That was my intention with them.
It's very cool. Yeah. I well, I guess I'm buying those because I'm a sucker for models.
You know what? Well, while you're talking there, I do have an image of the first print of these things, so you
Awesome.
can actually have a look at it. It might take me a couple seconds. My computer is being difficult.
You're
I
totally
just gotta
fine.
let it load. Well, we'll continue anyways until
Yeah.
it's done loading here.
Yeah. When you send it to Bryce, I'll download that and put it in our video
Cool.
feed.
Yeah, that's really good.
So are these 3D printed? Like
Yes, they're 3D printed resin. The
okay.
resolution is zero point 0.3 millimeters. Um, zero point 0.3 millimeters is the third of 40 thou. I like math, so that works out to 12 thousandths of an inch, which is approximately 3 to 4 hairs thick in resolution. So each
Nice.
layer it moves up that much. So the detail is there.
That is really nice. I think it's cool too, like you said, we're talking about bridging two gaps, like you said. We have comic people on one side and fantasy people or lovers of role-playing games on the other side. So like the option to say, hey, you're getting a little bit of both. So if I'm a person who is more on the role-playing game side, I'm going to enjoy that. But also for the people who are more the comic side, who have never bridged that gap before, are able to suddenly go, well, I've got this model now, and they put it's from this game that he played. What's that game and everything like that. I think that's really cool. Um, I have an interesting question about this. So this is a homebrew campaign you've done and created. Have you ever thought about something as maybe not specifically for this, campaign with the Kickstarter, but as something you do later on, making um your own like source book or material book for other
Campaign
people to
setting.
use? Yeah, like a campaign setting book that for this adventure that you've created in this world you've built.
Um, t- the short answer is I'm not against it. The reason I
Okay.
hesitate is, again, it's if I were to produce something like that, it would have to be the perfect storm of the right marketing, the right exposure, and the content would have to be such a gem to stand out from all the competition around it.
Hmm.
So what I wanted, I guess a bottleneck or a big governing variable is, um, am I dropping myself in a mosh pit of voices? So if there was a very heavy influence of fantasy comics, like there was superhero comics, I might have just written it out and tucked it away, and that
Hmm.
would have been it.
Hmm.
But because I think, like I said, I think it's worthy of the industry, and I'm not ripping off anything else. I think it's unique enough to stand on its own. But going back to the source material for my own RPG or just complementary equivalent, I don't think you guys know this yet. I haven't told you yet. 3 days ago, 4 days ago, I filmed a one-shot prequel to this comic book,
Oh, awesome.
fifth edition, where ironically I did adapt some characters and squeeze them into the 5e rules. Um, Two voice actors, some pros in California played. GM McLeod's of RPG All Stars,
Mhm.
and also Michael Towsey as well. And I also had two comic creators, indie creators. I've reviewed their books before, and one of them was kind of a unique comic book based off of his own RPG games, where he was a dungeon master. However, he adapted everything into a superhero style, so all of his books are based off of his adventures that he ran. And then the last one, he's got a couple of different unique books, but nothing D&D specific. And my goal for this, kind of like you mentioned, Bryce, you're reading this comic and it's to this game I never played. Maybe I want to play this game. Or the opposite, I play this game, I've never read a comic, but this is apparently based off of something I can relate to.
Hmm.
Mhm.
This one shot is supposed to be kind of a hybrid. I'm going to edit it so there's the least amount of dead time. It took 2 hours to film. I'm going to see if I can crush it into under an hour and say, if you're not sure if you want to buy into this book, this takes place just before the book starts. Like it literally
Hmm.
leads up to page one, which
That's
it
fantastic.
worked out very well. I was very happy about that. I've got my hands full in regards to editing. I have a second teaser trailer which will be coming out later in April, which shows about a page and a half of one of the scenes. It involves an interrogation, but I can't say any more than that. And kind of like you already said there, Bryce, there's all these dynamics of bridging that gap. How do I make something that is, if I'm going to appeal to these groups, I can't appeal to them half. Oh, by the
Mhm.
way, it's like my father's from my late father. He's from Northern Ireland. Somebody walks up to me and says, "I have Irish friends." Like I don't want to have that token acknowledgement. I want to say, "Hey,
Yeah.
this is something you'll like." This is something you will relate to. I am one of you. I love comics. I love tabletop, and I think it is just the perfect storm of something that both sides can definitely appreciate.
You spoke about that being fifth edition. Was this campaign that you ran in fifth edition, or is this an earlier edition of D&D?
I have I'm so sorry to say I've only ever played fifth edition. I've only been
Okay.
playing for just over a decade. Don't judge me. I've
No,
Well,
heard
you're
I
lots
totally
of
mean,
cool
fine.
things. I've heard bad about fourth. I've heard lots of good about three and three and a half. And
mhm.
first and advanced are kind of icons for their own cool reasons. But I've only
But
played
they
fifth
can be
edition.
hard to they can be
Yeah.
hard to do. I mean, fifth edition is I feel like fifth edition is where everybody is going to start now.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. You can pick
Mhm.
up, I can go down to Target down the street and I can pick up a fifth edition player's handbook.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's like they're handing it out with bread and milk at the grocery store. You know, so I mean they're like fifth edition is kind of like where everybody is learning now.
Yes. Yeah,
And
I agree
that's
with
I
that.
mean that's great, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm definitely um, I'm definitely interested in what edition fans buy into the book.
Hmm.
One of the things that I've heard a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot of concern, but the most noted concern is, are you going to get sued by Wizards of the Coast? And I said no, because my story was completely homebrew. So
Hmm.
someone brings up Chazgo, the blue skinned elf. A lot of people say, well, that's a drow. Well, no. So backstory of Chazgo is he's part of a group of elves that lived in mountains that are riddled with silver deposits. And I don't know if you guys know this. If you have enough exposure and consumption of silver, you tattoo your skin blue essentially.
Yeah, I've seen
And
the Papa Smurf guy.
yes, yes, exactly. And Chazgo was a product of that. Cool dynamics involving that. Well, he's coated in all this silver, so he has resistance to magic, which is a neat dynamic. And um, the more you dive into it, the more you realize the less and less it's like the lore of D&D.
Mhm.
And again, as I mentioned, the original players that played my homebrew, I removed those characters and put my own in for that same reason.
Mhm.
There's no reference to anything Forgotten Realms or anything like that.
Very good. Yeah, I mean, and I understand, you know, fans and supporters being concerned about something like that popping up and possibly, a lawsuit ruining, a story that they love. But I mean, especially with Wizards of the Coast, the names and concepts that have copyright are very specific, and
Mm.
they are laid out um in the license. So yeah, if you've
Just
covered your
steer clear of
bases,
that
you don't.
list and you're good.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
just don't say displacer beast or drow, and you're
Yeah,
you know
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep.
But with everything said, I think one of the dynamics I really like about this story is I already mentioned how the characters interact with each other, and we talked about thinking about the world that exists that you might not even get to talk about. Going back to that 80s trope and knights slay dragons save princess, I don't have any of that in play, but this story, and as you saw in the trailer, I can't mention too much more. It involves an incident regarding a local drug problem in that
Mm.
city. So the the characters there's a good or I should say a healthy amount. There's action, there's investigation, there's talking. There's a lot of dynamics. I think really good role players will see and appreciate. So I'm sure you've played enough tabletop to I had this really good session or I had this really bad session. All we did was fight monster after monster and I don't even know why we are fighting them. Or on the flip side, we talked for 3 hours And at the end of the day, we finally convinced the noble to open the back gate, and nothing happened. That's it. Um, and then you get the really good ones. Okay, I got to do all these checks. I got this unique application. I actually impressed the DM with a solution he did not anticipate. He let me describe the kill of this one monster, and it was really awesome because it inspired somebody else, and so forth and so on. And I think the story of this comic has a really good balance of that kind of stuff.
That's really awesome. I'm really looking forward to it.
I know.
It's been torture just sitting and watching. I've been mature enough to let the torture happen, knowing it's going to pay off later. But with that said, the torture's still been going. I just sitting there watching, do do do.
Mhm.
The few people that have read it so far, I've had relevant, positive reviews of it. The reason I say relevant is sometimes if you were to give something, say you drew a picture for a parent, isn't that great? They're not going to critique it. They're going to tell you it's great no matter what.
Yeah.
I haven't been getting any token comments like it was good, or it's usually I really loved when this happened. I liked this dynamic. It was really cool to see this. This is my favorite character. Yada yada yada. So I'm very encouraged and looking forward to seeing where this goes.
Well, any worthwhile work of art is, you're not going to please everyone, but the people you do are going to end up becoming loyal fans and really follow it.
Well, we'll see. Like I said, I want to know if it's worthy of the market. I don't know what the level of success is, and
Mhm.
I'm not anticipating a specific dollar amount. I'm not looking for a specific amount of followers. I just want to know where this rabbit hole goes. I
Mhm.
feel very encouraged. And like I said, the perfect storm. I like both genres. I have experience in both genres. The only experience I don't have is the professional side of the comic book group. Um, I did intentionally surround myself by a lot of talent, and it's my story. I don't know if I'm a good story writer, but again, on top of everything else, the reviews I'm getting back, like, yeah, this is something. So, uh, we'll see. We'll see on April 30th. That's for sure.
I think that's a good thing, honestly, to go into it. I think a lot of times, you gotta you see it with these people who make these Kickstarters and they pour, like you said, so much time and effort. And like you said, this is something that you put your blood, sweat, and tears into on top of already doing, family stuff and also your regular day job. And it's a project made with love and care. And I think it's almost better the way you're looking at it. It's not like you're saying, I don't have goals that I hope it hits. It's more I have confidence in what I've done. I'm excited to see how everyone else reacts to it. And I hope this becomes something that, like you said, it's an area in the market where you can put your stamp and say, this is something that the comic book industry can look at and say, hey, that Madcap 3 issue thing, that was really good at being very specifically, what it was at the time in that market. Um, and just like go with the flow. I think it's
Mm,
always good because, I feel bad for some of these people who jump on these Kickstarters that, it doesn't go their way and but I think there's something to always learn from it, and grow and get better with everything that you do with Kickstarters because Kickstarters aren't easy. Like we've talked to a few people on the show about their experience with Kickstarter and printing books and all that. And it's not always easy. And people don't always, I think, understand, well, just because, you're one person who's working with all these people and trying to get this book done. It's not like it's just an
hmm.
easy process. It's a lot of labor. And that's why I'm so excited you got to come on today. And I think for myself, I see your passion, and that's what makes me so excited. Not only seeing what's here, but seeing how much passion and care. Like you said, you didn't go into this going, well, I'll just see how it goes. It was like, I want the best quality I can get for so when I do this, it's gonna be the best it can be.
Yeah, I definitely didn't want to take any half measures on it. So,
Hmm.
obviously, I did have a budget, and I'm sure if I had unlimited resources, maybe I could add additional talent to what I already have. But for a first time comic, as you described that main cover, I wanted it to be a statement. So I think I already said this, but all three issues take place over one night. Each issue is an act, and the final issue, I obviously can't talk about it now, but what I will say, it is a very satisfying ending. Anybody
Very
who's played a
nice.
one shot before, you kind of have to force a story. I mean, you never want to railroad a story in D&D, and
Right.
I don't feel this is, I mean, I'm not railroading it, it's all my story and my players,
Mhm.
but beginning to end, if you've ever played a really satisfying one shot, these three issues combined definitely give you that one shot feel. That's for damn sure.
That's great. So Bryce, you want to hit him with our standard set of magical questions?
Yeah, but these ones have to be a little bit different because normally these are a little bit. I think these are still good in some regards, but I actually need to pull them up too. I just realized I closed that tab for when I did it. But we always ask people favorite questions, that they ask. You talked about. I'll shift my original question. I always ask people. Besides D&D, is there a role-playing game that you're interested in trying out at some point?
Um, so again, I started playing D&D late in the game.
Hmm.
I started when I was just before I turned 30. Again, responsibilities, I haven't really had a chance to branch out too much.
Right.
I played Pathfinder. I've never played Starfinder. I've read up uh, a significant amount about it. Very, very interesting to just it's it's the same lore, but long into the future. And here's a missing
Yeah.
planet. And here's dynamics involving traveling in space, and I think that stuff's really cool.
And there's a new edition coming.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's a new edition, and I one thing I've never appreciated is I appreciate positive rivalries, but I never appreciate negative ones. So
Mhm.
you're going to have fans of a specific tabletop RPG, and sometimes people get a little too defensive or elitist over
Mhm.
their content that they love so much. But I'm more interested in hearing the positive virtues of why one likes a specific
Hmm.
tabletop RPG as opposed to why they think a different one is no good and trashing it essentially.
Same here.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more to get along over celebrating each other's likes as opposed to forcing
Mhm.
people to like your own stuff.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Um, Totally agree with that. Next question. What's your favorite type of candy?
Favorite type of candy? Well, you know what? There's a shift. So, disclaimer: I live out in Winnipeg, as I said, in Canada. So I don't know if these are international. If they are, then I plead my ignorance. But there's actually a wide range. I like Snickers. I know you guys know Snickers. Do
Mm,
you guys have Smarties or M&Ms?
we
Both.
have both.
You have both now? I
Yep.
think for a
Yeah.
while one of them was only in Canada. Well, anyways,
No.
those are great. Rolos are great.
Mhm.
Twix, I love Twix. Nibs, they're my favorite licorice. The soft
Mhm.
ones, not the Twizzlers, where they're hollow and kind of plasticky. But nibs are just delicious. Um, I don't per se have a favorite, but there are ones that I really like. Obviously, I love orange chocolate. You know, they
Oh
come in
yeah.
the segments. And you just smash
Yeah.
them, open them up. Those are great. Christmas time, there's obviously candy canes, but I like mint gummy leaves. I don't the depending
Hmm.
who supplies them, they call them different things, but they seem to have the same manufacturer wherever you are.
Haven't had those.
No, neat.
Yeah, it sounds weird. It's like a spearmint flavor. It's like not juicy fruit, but it's cousin spearmint. It's like that,
Mhm.
but in gummy form, and it's
Ah,
shaped.
Okay.
It looks like a green Christmas tree, essentially. They're
that
yummy.
sounds pretty good.
Yeah, I like those a lot. Yeah, lots of candy to be had.
That's really fine. Again, shift on this one. If there was one person that you could get to work with you on this comic in the comic industry, who would it be and why?
Oh, that one's tough. Can I break that down into different roles of
Oh
making a
yeah.
comic? Okay,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
um, if I were to, if let's start with covers. Cover artists, just to have the experience and appreciate something from my childhood. Again, unlimited funds, and I could pick anybody. Alex Ross would be on the list.
Oh
I don't
yeah.
know if you guys know Alex Ross.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Kingdom Come, okay. Um, Bill Sienkiewicz.
Oh, absolutely.
I definitely would like his stuff. Um, if I were to do it strategically, just for the sake of star power, just to get more spotlight on my book, I'd probably pick some powerhouses. The obvious, like McFarlane, Lee Field, Jim Lee. I'm a big fan of Jim Lee's work.
Hmm. Gorgeous work always from Jim.
If we were talking about writing, um, I don't know. I feel kind of selfish, almost like Gollum with the ring. I don't think I'd want anybody to write it. I think because it's, and I'm sure Stan Lee, I thought up this character and eventually somebody
Mhm.
else is writing it. I
Yeah.
don't think I'm ready for that for writing.
Yeah.
Um, Interiors. Um, Somebody did a one. Where is it? Wish it would show up here. Give me. So I had a fella do a pinup for me. I wish I could look it up here, but my computer is obviously requiring a reboot. Um, Anyways, Sean Langley, he did the art for a pinup for one of the add-ons for my Kickstarter.
Okay.
I think it'd be cool to have him do the interiors. His that pinup was also colored by Dan Kemp. I think the two of them did an excellent job. Now, you've all seen comics of different levels of style and quality, and they're all successful in their own respects. But one thing I really, really appreciated, if you have the right two pieces of talent that complement each other, it's just an awesome thing. My screen went funny here. Can you guys, there we
Yeah.
are.
Yeah, we're
All
good.
right, cool. Sorry about that. I
No,
did the
you're
Canadian thing and apologized.
good.
So, Sean Langley and Dan Kemp, I think what they did for representing my character for their style and the lighting, the positioning, the mood
Hmm.
between the two of them combined, um, it was really really nice. I would love to see them do an entire interiors on one of my books, which would be really really cool.
Hmm.
In regards to anybody else working on my book, it would be pretty much. I mean, I'm really happy with the lettering. Micah Myers did a great job. I think after that, it would just be for the sake of star power.
Yeah.
But the names I named off, I think, cover everything. If I had a bucket list, I think I've put them all in there.
Fair enough. I have one. I would love to see Frank Whiteley do something with some of these characters.
Yeah.
I've always loved Frank Whiteley's work. But again, that guy, you gotta love him. But if he's doing a monthly issue, you know it's gonna be late because he takes so long with all the amazing
Yes.
detail and stuff he does for his work. But very cool.
Oh, Capallo, obviously, Capallo for Spawn. I forgot
Oh
about
yeah.
that name. My bad. I cut you off there. You were
Yeah,
saying.
no, you're good. Totally fine. Um, okay, next question. If you could ride any animal into battle, what would it be and why? It can be real or fictional.
Any animal? Oh, just straight up grizzly bear,
Heck
without
yeah.
hesitation. There's actually I'm not even gonna say, but it's not in this mini series, but there's actually an individual that rides a bear out in the lore somewhere, but I won't say any more about that.
Okay, that
That
sounds
would be
awesome to me.
terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, it's something, that's for sure.
And then our final question we always wrap up is, what is your opinion on garden gnomes?
Garden gnomes. You know what? There's actually a wide variety. application of those things. It's actually quite amusing, from holding doors open to decorating lawns to target practice or just playing pranks on friends. Like they have a surprising amount of versatility to them.
Yep.
There's and the other weird thing is there's so many of them. My first impression of garden gnomes when I was a kid was Revenge of the Lawn Gnomes. Is a book in the Goosebumps saga by R.L.
Hmm.
Stein. Although I read that over 20, 30 years ago, but it was I vaguely remember that story arc, and they only moved when you weren't watching. And
Yep.
I remember in the live reenactment where Jack Black played R.L. Stein. I didn't like the second one, but the first one, the lawn gnomes were in that, and I loved
Mhm.
that scene. That just made me laugh.
It was a good callback.
Yes,
Very good. So that is pretty much all of our questions. I again, Ray, so different from what we normally cover, but I'm super grateful you reached out and talked to us. Any last words from you? First off, again, remind people when the Kickstarter is starting, and then also, where can people find you if they want to find you on social media to take kind of keep following and watch this whole process happen?
absolutely. So, the Madcaps issue number one releases April 30th. You can look it up on Kickstarter. It's by Philbo Publishing. He's running my Kickstarter for me. I'm very fortunate there. If you're trying to find me, you can find me on Facebook as DM Ray. If you're looking for me on Instagram, you can find me as Raymond the DM. DM Ray was taken, unfortunately. Um, I do have a Twitter account, but it's not that active.
Okay.
I have it started, but I don't have it established. Essentially, um, this book, I know I've already said this part, but I'll say it one more time. I've been playing D&D for well over a decade, and this is this is a representation of one of your people. So much like
Mhm.
watching Honor Among Thieves and having that joy inside of watching a non D&D fan appreciate the lore that you're always jumping into every week or every month. This comic is an attempt to dabble in that same style of appreciation from non-RPG fans. And I know I've already said this part as well, but if you support this comic, you're supporting one of your own. So uh, if you're compelled to do so, if you can share anything you can find online, you'll be helping this out. And one of the
Absolutely.
coolest things is, even though I do mention a lot about this being based off of tabletop RPG, anybody who just sees the trailer, it doesn't say D&D or Pathfinder or anything like that. It just
Right.
looks like a fantasy setting, and it looks unique enough, as you've already pointed out, Bryce. Just looking at the cover, okay, you've got me. Let's see what you have. So
Absolutely.
definitely look it up on the Kickstarter for sure. And it's, as of this recording, just under 7 weeks to go. And 7 weeks is a lot shorter than the last pinch of years I've been sitting, watching, and waiting.
Absolutely.
Haha, it's almost gonna happen.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
almost time. Well, thank you again so much for coming on. I know Bryce and I are both very excited about this. Just learning about this, like it's almost like you have made a comic book for the two of us. So
Right.
we really do appreciate the all of the effort that you put into it because it seems really fantastic.
Right on. Well, I've had lots of fun, and I look forward to having more fun.
Thank you so much. So, everybody, if you want to leave any questions or comments down below, we can make sure that we get those to Ray to maybe we can start a conversation here and get everybody really excited.
I'm happy to come on again and answer any questions if you have enough.
Sure.
Heck
Thanks a
yeah.
lot.
Bye.
Bye.